my name is Poppy Tooker. I'm a native New Orleanian who does all sorts of things in the world of hospitality and food and drink here in New Orleans, and I was absolutely honored to ask to put this panel of my favorite, most amazing entrepreneurs together to talk with you all tonight. And so I think we'll get started by letting the panel introduce themselves. And why don't we have ladies first?
Really?
How about that?
Wow.
Becky,
How
please tell these
forward-thinking
nice
of
people
you.
who you are.
Hey y'all, how you doing? I am Becky the Oyster Girl. I have an all-women's traveling oyster bar company called Girls One Shuck. We provide raw and char-grilled oysters at the location of your choice anywhere in the New Orleans metro area.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And sitting to Becky's left is sort of the senior statesman of the panel, because he's been, well, he has great longevity as an entrepreneur. That's my friend Vance Vaucresson.
How you doing? My name is Vance Vaucresson. I'm with Vaucresson Sausage Company here in New Orleans. It's a third generation family business, been around since 1899 within the Creole community in the 7th Ward of New Orleans, which is a very hotbed of development now. And one of the things that we've been involved with, not only having a meat market and then a USDA and state inspected processing facility, we also do a lot of festivals. We're the only original food vendor left at the New Orleans Jazz Fest. This will be our 50th year. We're also an original vendor of the French Quarter Festival and probably have been doing food concessions for the last 50 years before a lot of these festivals came around. Now we're working on our building at St. Bernard and Roman, where we're redeveloping our old plant and putting it back into commerce as a restaurant/deli.
Well, and then seated in the middle is my dear friend Neil Bodenheimer, and he is the drinking part of the show tonight.
So my name is Neil Bodenheimer, and I'm the founder of Cure on Ferret Street, and we also have Cane and Table in our company as well. I'm a co-chair of the Tales of the Cocktail Foundation. We've had some other businesses along the way. Some are here, some are not, but that's part of entrepreneurship, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. And then, last but certainly not least, a one-time New Orleanian who has left us, but he's back for tonight, Zach Engel.
Yeah, my name is Zach Engel. I was here for the last 4 years. I recently moved to Chicago to open up my first restaurant in the Lincoln Park neighborhood called Galit. And I was the chef de cuisine at Shaya for three years, and culinary director for Pomegranate Hospitality for the last year, which is the company that oversees Saba here in New Orleans, Alon Shai's Israeli restaurant, and Safta in Denver.
Thank you. Well, Zach, I think since you're, in essence, out of everybody on the panel, you're the one who's really just getting started in many ways. That's my first question, is how did you get started? So how's this project going?
Well, I can feel that they're all laughing at me right now because they know that what I'm in store for after years of experience.
You're already feeling it.
I am feeling it. We just had an interesting conversation. So I got started, I would say a long time ago. When I graduated from Tulane, I went into cooking. I knew that what I wanted to do was open my own restaurant, and that's always been the end game. And so the last 10 years have been leading up to a point where I can actually accomplish that goal. But now that I'm in the thick of it, or like just the beginning of the thick of it, it's like a very interesting experience. I would say an emotional roller coaster is like a very important thing to say. There's highs and lows, and there's also like we were just talking about, like very laughable moments where you're kind of like, this is literally what I've chose to do. Mm-hmm. It is absolute chaos. There is nothing I can really do that much that's in my control, and it's just kind of funny.
Mm-hmm. So, and in case anybody doesn't know, what is this you're about to do?
I'm about to open up a restaurant that's like fine dining with food that isn't really cooked in Chicago, in a neighborhood where no one really necessarily is doing fine dining in the last 10 years. So I'm kind of like pioneering cuisine and like a regional demographic. So that's very tricky to like make decisions now to position ourselves to be immediately successful and then successful 10 years from now and try and still be in business.
Well, let's flip from the newest to the oldest. Vance, how did you get started?
Well, if any of you come from family businesses or have any peripheral family business that you either chose to be into or were told you have to be into, and if you wanted to live in that house, it's something that since from 8 years old I was mixing meat, grinding, making sausage, hogshead cheese, things like that, and learning pretty much from a various group of men over time, and then just participated in all the other things. I'm the youngest of three siblings, and I was 10 years apart from my other two brothers. And one of the challenges in a family business, and Ms. Brennan is here, and she may know this, you don't always want to go into the family business. A lot of times it's a lot of long hours, hard work, and my older two brothers just opted not to. One decided to be an opera singer and tour the world. Another one still trying to figure out what he wants to do. And then I just decided to, because of the commitments my family made, to do that. Some of the challenges is that when you're going from generation to generation, I went off to school in Atlanta, got a degree, came back, and my dad was like, okay, here, fix it. And I'm like, okay. And it seemed like in this time when I was away, nothing changed. Time stood still. And we argued every day versus practicality and theory. And every time I brought an idea, he would say, oh, well, you know, I've been doing it like this way for years, your grandfather, and we're not going to change anything. And I said, but if we want to grow, if we want to do anything, we have to make some changes. So there was those challenges as well. I think that anytime you go into something that has been established and has a history and has a developed brand, you have to be very careful. Because one, you don't know who actually is watching. You don't know who is paying attention to see what you do because of the equity that you've established within your community. The community I'm speaking about particularly is the Creole community in New Orleans, which I know some great newspapers like the New York Times has, as Poppy said at one time, brought me in because they at one time said Creole people were fables, were fairy folk, that we didn't exist. And one of the things that I find is that there's been a miseducation as to, one, what Creole is, what the culture represents, and who is a part of that particular designation. And one of the things that I've always wanted to do is to make sure that as a business person, you have a responsibility if you're going to operate within a certain culture, whether it's Italian food, whether it's Louisiana Cajun food, whether it's Creole food, to educate the consumer as to what you are, become an authority, make sure that as you grow and as you sustain yourself, that those consumers that come across your door leave with an understanding about what you are, how relevant you are to the culture, and why you represent the culture the way you do, and your food.
Wow. Okay, now,
Good night. Pretty much all we can teach you. Really, that.
Neil, you were much like Zach just described for us, you too were a pioneer. Tell us about your pioneering days.
So it's kind of a long story, so I'll do my best to kind of condense it. I'm a native New Orleanian, and I left and bartended in New York, and was very happy up there. And then Katrina happened, and I think if you were born here, you felt a calling to come back, and I did, and I think that I came back, and I'd been working on a bar in New York that would eventually become Cure here, and I just thought to myself, why change it? It's not, if I thought it would work in New York, do I think that people in New Orleans are any different? And yes, in some ways we are, but I didn't feel like it needed to be dumbed down. I felt like we had a great tradition of cocktails, and I just started working on it. And we didn't have a lot of money, and so as we started looking around, we came to Ferret Street, and we really wanted to own the property, and we said, let's give it a try. And we felt like the street, really the best days were ahead of it, and we bought the building, and we worked on it, and we hoped, and we prayed, and people came, and people liked it, and it just kind of had its own momentum, and the street grew up around us. And that's not to say that there wasn't stuff there before, but the identity of the street has changed quite a bit, and it's thriving now, and we feel pretty proud to be a part of it. And since then, we've just been able to grow a little bit, grow, contract, grow, and that's kind of the 5-cent version.
Well, anybody who goes to Ferret Street can thank Neil, because I'll tell you, Cure is one of the great foundations of Ferret Street. Becky, I'm so glad that you were able to join us, because you're like representing all women and women businesses here tonight. So tell us about your all-woman business and
I do
why...
have a few men on staff, just so everybody knows. I like to make that clear, but as a woman running my first small business, but watching my mother run her own small business for 48 years in childcare, I was working when I was 7, 8, 9, 10. When you have someone that you look up to, the sacrifice isn't even a sacrifice anymore. It's just a part of your daily existence. So when I started my business 5 years ago, it just felt natural. I was an educator at the time. It was completely accidental. I recognized the fact that in my own life, I've always loved role reversal. I've always loved to do things that men are supposed to do, and vice versa. I like to teach men how to do things that women are supposed to do. And so a friend of mine moved here from Oregon. Boys got drunk in a crawfish boil. She shucked a whole sack of oysters in the dark with one tea light candle. And I had never seen a woman shuck an oyster, not in New Orleans.
No.
And I was totally fascinated. I'm a 20-year bartender. So I created the sauces and the condiments. I cut all the lemons, I created the table display. And my friend shucked the oysters. So there's two of us. I slapped her around for a year. And finally she's like, this is a lot of work. You have to help me. And so I've always worked with my hands. I play guitar, piano, seamstress, tactile, anything. I've been a carpenter. I've done welding. I've done a ton of things in my life. And all of that has now been poured into my business nuance, which I did not expect. So any tools that you have in your personality or job, any job you've ever had, it's going to come into play at another point in your life. I think both of you could agree with all of us 100%. At some point. Something that you did when you were 16 for a job, it's going to come back around when you're a small business owner.
And your mistakes.
And your mistakes too. That's a very good point. So I shucked my first oyster in November of 2013 and loved it immediately.
Wow.
And took a huge chance. I just took a huge risk.
Well,
and started my company.
The next thing I wanted to discuss, and so perhaps Becky, you can continue that theme, is how did the business grow, and what was the moment where you said to yourself, wow, this thing's really happening?
I have some pretty distinct markers. I started the LLC in September of 2014. I was finishing my master's in education. I ran into Ian McNulty, food writer for The Advocate, at an art show about a week later, and I just flippantly said, hey Ian, I just started an all-women's oyster shucking company. And he said, excuse me? What did you just say to me? And I said, yeah, my friends are getting married next month, so we have one wedding booked, right? I have a company now, because I have an LLC and we booked a wedding. And I charged them $300. Now, if you can wrap your head around that, I'm not the money business sense person in my company. I would give everything away for free. So Ian said, can I come to the wedding? And they were personal friends. I said, of course. He wrote an article in October, we got published, and it has been an unstoppable train ever since. I call it the oyster train. I'm just chasing it constantly. I was using an email address from high school, you guys, as like my business things you learn. I was using my personal phone number to have people call me. So for the first 2 years, it was just me chasing the oyster train. I finished my master's. I had 2 job interviews at schools. I turned them both down at really well-paying salaries. I've never made less money in my entire life, and I've never been happier. But it is an emotional roller coaster. Some days you just want to give it all up. And then, so the minute I knew that we were a real company, I like how you mentioned planning for now, but you want to still be here in 10 years, 20 years. I knew the financial investment to do what I am doing would be expensive because a raw shellfish product at a different location every single day. Just the permitting and the licensing alone took me years to convince the health departments that we could do it and that we could do it safely. So the very first thing I invested in was insurance. I have general liability, workman's comp. I don't want my girls to get hurt on the job site. We have tons of equipment, but that was really important to me. So initially the investment was just pouring money into getting the company to a stage where I thought legally I want to be able to go anywhere in New Orleans and do this and do it proudly. A lot of people that do catering or do oyster catering, it's very underground. I mean, I love to go second line and I eat the oysters off the back of those trucks. Don't think I don't. But we were asked to do, let's see, it was a conference on the floor of the Superdome for the IPW conference. There were 75 countries being represented in New Orleans. We were asked to do, 3,000 oysters on the floor of the Superdome with Dr. John and Kermit Ruffins performing right in front of us. And I didn't believe it was a real job, so I gave them a price quote. They accepted the price quote. I called my insurance guy to make sure we had the coverage, and they were the exact same number. So we did the job. I lost money because I had to pay out labor and product, but there were 24 other restaurants on the floor of the Superdome. That was the day that New Orleans saw 2 Girls One Shuck. I had 8 women on floor shucking raw oysters live. It was phenomenal. We had lines on both sides of the table. I get chills. They gave us one of those little foam signs, and I keep that in my office. I'm like, you cost me so much money. But this was the moment that I was like, this is a real business. So.
Neil, when did you say, okay, this is the real thing? But even more so, could you address your growth a little bit? Because
Sure.
you have done some amazing.
So we, I think you start to know it's a real, particularly when you're doing, a location, you start to, when you sign the loans, it gets pretty real pretty fast. And I think that was like the first step, and then you go into construction and you go into a significant amount of debt as you're doing it, and the stress levels go up. Mm-hmm. Things don't go exactly according to plan. Never. And then they go up again. And then, for us, we ran at Cure, we actually ran out of money. And we had to go and borrow more, which was, we didn't get exactly what we had hoped for, and we had to go borrow more. And I ended up putting my personal bar up for sale for the first 2 weeks. And it was, you would never, if I could at 42 look back and tell myself at 30 that I was going to do that, I had to tell myself no way, 100 different ways. And it worked out for us, but it probably shouldn't have, to be honest. And from there, it grew. We were able to pay back the Gap loan. We were able to start to fill out our giant back bar with booze. And it just, we were lucky in that our first year took off really well. And then the oil spill happened the next year, and we actually dipped pretty substantially. And then we've actually grown every year since. So we're about to celebrate our 10-year anniversary. And I just think that for our growth, it's always been the willingness to, our goal is to always take a meeting. And sometimes it can waste your time, and sometimes it leads to things that you wish you didn't do. But what we've said is that if we can always at least look at opportunities and give them an honest evaluation, that it can lead to growth for us. And so our second project was a management contract at a hotel right next door. We worked 4.5 of our 5-year contract before the hotel sold. And then when it sold, we were able to walk away. And then very shortly after, we opened our place in the French Quarter. We had a friend who ran a business that was failing, and he said, "Do you want to take it over?" And we did, and that ended up being a great thing for us. And then we did a little consulting, and then we ended up, some of them great, some of them not, and learned some stuff about co-branding and sharing our brand along the way. And then we did a small restaurant in Bywater, which we closed after 13 months. And so sometimes they've been good, sometimes they've been bad, but you're always learning, and and you're always trying to see what the next project is that you're interested in. And I think that's kind of always been our key, is that we follow what we're interested in. And sometimes they're great, sometimes they're not, but we keep on trying.
And Zach, that's not really a fair question for you, because I don't know
Yeah, I was
that
gonna
you.
say.
I don't know that you've grown your business, but have you had this thing's really happening and feeling yet?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's come. So it's come in a few different ways. It still doesn't totally feel real. Like, until that kitchen is set and the food is in and like guests are walking in, it probably won't really feel real. But like, so I'm very fortunate to be able to, like, without doing anything, get a significant amount of press for the opening, for a lot of reasons. But that has never really felt real. Do you guys know David Chang from Momofuku Restaurants in New York? He's got a great podcast that I listen to all the time, and he just kind of like talks with other people about hospitality and how it relates to other things. And he's always talking like he has imposter syndrome, which is like he never feels like it's real. That's literally how I live my life. Like, I never feel like anything that I do is ever actually the real thing, which keeps me moving forward to feel like I have to, like, for whatever reason, prove it to people. It's like a motivational tool I have for myself. But, like, so all that stuff never feels real. Like, when I see the stories come out, oh, this restaurant's highly anticipated in Chicago, I'm like, okay, cool, that makes me nervous because I have to live up to the hype. But the big thing is, like, when I wrote that first 6-figure check for rent deposit, that's when it feels real.
Yeah.
That's when you're like, I'm playing with the big boys now, and everything's on the table. Like, this is like the whole Megillah right now.
But Vance, I think that perhaps you had that this is really happening feeling at one of the worst times in your life. I think perhaps if I know enough about you, it had something to do with the school board contract and that sort of thing. Would you like to tell us about, was that your this is really happening moment?
Just to give a little background, my dad was quite a entrepreneur. He was probably an undiagnosed ADHD person. He couldn't sit still, and he went from business to business to business. He had a 24-hour package liquor store. He had a cigarette distribution company. He had the meat market. He had a real estate company. But then in the mid-'60s, he decided to partner with a guy named Larry Borenstein, who started Preservation Hall. And they decided to open up a Creole restaurant at 624 Bourbon called Vaucresson's Cafe Creole. Now, the thing is, at the time, no person of color was allowed to have or had ever had a business post-Reconstruction on Bourbon Street. And when it was said, there was 3 families that ran the quarter, and they made, not anymore because of what, but then there were 3 families. There was the Carnots, who were the French Creoles, white. Then you had the Caraces, who was the Dixie Mafia Italians. And then you had the Khans, the Jewish family that owned a lot of the real estate in the quarter. You know what I'm talking about. So, my dad knew all of them. Now you see me, right? Some of you, who's from here, who's not from here? Okay? So, as you know, there's a lot of people in New Orleans that you look at and you think they might be white, and you're like, wait a minute, or what are they? Well, my dad had sky blue eyes and just looked just like a white man. And he navigated the quarter And no one questioned him. He was a good businessman. He made these connections with those three families. When the time came up that they wanted to do this restaurant, those three families gave the okay. When they went to open it, they had an organization called the Bourbon Street Merchants Association. I think it still exists today. Had a meeting at the Quarter Two Sisters. And my dad went with Larry, and he sat at the table. This is some of the stuff you go through in business back then, the mid-'60s. And a gentleman who owned a business on Bourbon Street came and said, hey man, how you doing, Sonny? Everything's good? Oh, great, everything, blah, blah, blah. And all of a sudden he switched. He started looking around the room and he says, where is he? And they said, what are you talking about? That nigga that's moving on Bourbon Street. He's gonna have our property values go down. Those people are gonna think they can come to our restaurants and do all of this type of stuff. So Larry looked at him and said, hey man, I know him. I'm gonna introduce you to him. So the guy's like, where is he? He said, you know Sonny? He's like, yeah. He said, that's the new on Bourbon Street. And the guy, my dad told me, he said he turned red, got up and left before the meeting started. My dad says, son, he says, I used to see him all the time. He says, he used to avoid me. He says, not because he was racist, because at that point he was embarrassed, because he knew me as a man. And then from that point on, the Jazz and Heritage Festival was actually conceived in our restaurant. George Wein came, Alan Jaffe, who was managing Preservation Hall, Larry Bornstein. They wanted to know why he was at the Newport News Jazz Festival starting this festival and doing it well. How come New Orleans doesn't have this? So brainstormed, said, Sonny, you come and bring some food. Go talk to Buster Holmes, see if he can come and do his chicken. Next thing you know, here we are in the Congo Square where they had more musicians than they had people. But we were there and we believed in it because it was about New Orleans and the culture. We stayed in the Quarter for about 9 years. Bourbon Street changed. The restaurant business changed. We sold it, moved out, went back and had our meat market. And then my dad got this big idea. I want to have a sausage processing facility. Did no research, did everything off of his gut, spent all of his money converting his old grocery store into a processing facility, went to the state and the feds. They came in and said, well, you minimally pass, but you can have it. And then after that, we like, okay, now we got to get some business. We struggled for a long time, and then finally they had a gentleman who had the largest grocery store chain in the city, John Schwegman's, had about 37% market share in the area. People couldn't understand, how can you have that much? But the concept of the store was, we're gonna put everything in it, so one-stop drop. We'll have your pharmacy, we'll have your doctor's office, we'll have your eye doctor, we'll have all of that. You just come here. And that was one of the largest chains we had. Winn-Dixie, Canal Villery, all of them couldn't understand how this thing worked. We finally got in Schwegman's. And then from there, we went to Winn-Dixie, we went to Canal Villery, we went to Sam's, we went to all of them and got in their stores. And before that, we were fully distributed in there. We started doing school board business. We started doing this, the Orleans Parish School Board, Jefferson Parish School Board. And in that time frame, we had people who told us, we're gonna put y'all out of business. We had processors that said, oh, we'll put you out of business. So we had to fight them. We fought distributors, all because we were a minority company. They didn't want us to come into those play areas to try to make and bid us out. The stuff they were doing, we knew it was illegal. And they did whatever they could, but we stayed. We were in so much debt. We had lines of credit maxed trying to compete just to float money, to bid and bring all this stuff in. And I tell you, you never know your connections until you use them. We had gotten to the point where when we were trying to bid with people like Sara Lee, Brian Foods, all of them, they all told us no, because the people that had been doing business said, do not bid there. So my dad went to a guy named Angelo Paternoster. Paternoster Brothers had a building on Elysian Fields. He just happened to be, supposedly, the head of the Dixie Mafia at the time. My dad said, look, we need some help. Can you make some calls? He says, all right. Next thing you know, we got a call from Hillshire Foods, got a call from Sara Lee, and one day I'm in the office and I get a message from Robert Bryan. I said, Robert Bryan? I said, called him back and he had this thick accent. Yeah, this is Robert Bryan, Bryan Foods. Heard you need some quotes. I'm willing to go ahead and give that to you. I was just amazed. So we started fighting with these big distributors. And I'll never forget when I went to bring that bid list in, and they looked at me walk in, and they heard all the stuff I bid on. The man told me, he says, it's war. And they fought us, and they had millions of dollars. They said, we've got 15 trucks, we've got millions of dollars in lines of credit. We're gonna put you out of business. We just kept fighting. Eventually, they called us and said, we wanna wave the white flag. We wanna go ahead and say, look, you keep these, your products, and let us have the rest. I said, well, we're gonna keep our products, and we're gonna take a few of the other ones just because you put us through this foolishness. And everything was good, and then Katrina hit. I had freezers full of product, and I was self-distributed. I don't know how I used to rent trucks. I was floating money. Katrina hit, and the one thing that I learned is called crisis management. I had 5 insurance policies. One was flood. I didn't max it out. It was about $90,000. The National Flood Insurance Program could have got up to $500,000. All the other ones, once the storm was made to be a flood, all of them said there's flood exclusions. So I couldn't collect on anything. Then I had a sibling who had, in my dad's infinite wisdom, wanting all of his sons to be in the business. He didn't want anything to do with it. Gave him percentage in stock, 37.5%. So when I go to do an SBA disaster loan, you need 20% personal guarantee, whoever's gonna apply for it. There's no way I was gonna call my brother. We didn't talk. There's no way I was gonna let him hold me hostage. So I've been rebuilding this slowly but surely. Just did my festivals, kept doing that, kept my brand on there, out there. I'm not in the stores yet. I'm not in my own facility yet, but we're getting there. Through the grace of God, if you have a faith, whatever your religion is, and your community. I talked to so many people trying to get help, and I'm gonna be honest with you. In New Orleans and in a lot of major cities, black businesses are much farther behind in terms of access to equity, access to capital, and access to investors. I was on a panel with Adolfo Garcia, and he was saying, oh, I can call up, one of my partners is from Venezuela, one of my partners is from Panama, one of my partners, all of this model of these talented chefs, they find investment partners, and then all of a sudden they pop up restaurants. Guys got Boucherie and got Bourré, same thing. Nathaniel, Zimmet, partners, people came and invested. It's not been afforded to the black culinary talent in the city. And when you talk to Ms. Chase, first thing she'll tell you is, first of all, I don't have any letters. I'm a cook. It's just that I lived around long enough and y'all ate over here enough, y'all decided to make me a chef. She tells everybody, go get your letters, because that's the only thing that they'll respect. And what you gotta realize is, as these chefs, in New Orleans, before a certain time frame, all of the people that ran the kitchens were black cooks. They didn't have letters. And then time changed, and all of these chefs started coming in the city with letters. And all of those chefs, all those cooks, were then relinquished to backstaff, dishwashers, and the like, and run out of the culinary business. You had a few that stayed. Lewis Adams at the where?
Giacomo's.
No, that was Austin Leslie.
Oh, sorry.
But no, Lewis Adams was at the Pontchartrain. And you had Michael Roussel at Brennan's. You had these people, but you didn't have many. But you had this city that was full of all of this talent. The people that sowed the seed of Creole cooking was turned over to people that were coming in, weren't even from here. I don't know the man. He's done great. But most people think that Irma Lagasse is from New Orleans. It's from Fall Rivers, Massachusetts, at the Johnson and Wales. And he just happened to work his brand. But
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, that's all right.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. So Vance gave us enough pain for everybody.
I apologize.
But
I'm excited.
and then some, a couple of generations worth of pain. And that's why you're here, Vance, because nobody knows about that better than you. But the three of you newcomers, compared to Mr. Vaucresson, tell us about your most painful time. when have you questioned yourself and said, what have I done? That six-figure check?
Yeah, that was a big one. I'm in this interesting phase that I'm sure you guys, well, I mean, you probably know too, but like stuff just keeps happening poorly. I took over an existing restaurant space, and real estate's very interesting for restaurants. It's key to almost everything that you do. Like, you can put out great food and have great service, but if you're in a bad location or the building is costing you money, it can put you out of business pretty easily. So we think that we did the right thing, we're in the right space, everything's set up, design's great, we're good, we're rolling. And then like dumb little things that keep adding up, like there's no shutoff valves for any of the water except for one. So if I turn off the dishwasher to fix it in the middle of service, I have to shut off all the water of the restaurant. So now you gotta pay a plumber to put shutoff valves everywhere.
Money well spent though.
Money well spent. Obviously, like, you have to do it. Water heater broke, not because of us, because of potentially landlord negligence before we got the space. So then it's like, oh, $10,000. Like, you just have to spend it because you don't have an option. You're not going to pass a health inspection without hot water. So like right now, that's kind of where I'm at, where the stuff's like kind of building up. I was talking with Neil earlier. It's just funny because I know it's not going to end. But that's the stuff that's like, it's painful because it's putting me in a position where I am very fortunate to be able to like raise money from like the Jewish community, like in Chicago, and like from friends and family that like is awarded to me, and I acknowledge that, and even like some connections I made at Tulane. But that money is just going that I wasn't planning on, that I didn't promise. So now I'm breaking promises to people and saying they're gonna get their money back in a certain time, and now, not that I wasn't gonna work hard, but now there's 17 million things on the back that are like, now you gotta work harder to get that money back. And so it's like, I'm in this interesting part where it's like just consistently just like hitting you with little pebbles until you like try to give up, but you just kind of have to keep going.
It's good. Death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's crazy.
How about you?
Well, I mean, I will say that I think that brings up a great point. And I think in order to be successful, you have to be, there are so many highs and lows in this business. And I can remember a bunch along the way. And it's trying to keep level, I think is critically important. Because if you go on that emotional roller coaster, you're going to drive yourself crazy. And I think for us, we've had our share. I don't think we've been doing it long enough to have that many highs and lows. But for us, I mean, closing a business, it's hard, and it's you put a lot into a business to get it going, and I'd be lying if I said there wasn't ego in it, and pride, and when you do it and you have to make those decisions, they're hard, and it's hard not to go into a funk about it. But I think that's the thing about life, is that, and this is business and life, is that if when bad times happen, what it's I think I heard a quote. It's when bad times happen, the strong survive, and you just have to make sure that that bad times are going to happen. It's not always going to be great, but you have to do your best to try and know that bad times are going to end and good times will start, but you have to be strong to get to the good times.
I just have to ask you, do you have any little trick you can share with us? How do you keep yourself from going, whoa? I mean, do you whistle a happy little tune? What do you do exactly, Neil?
No, I mean, I think to be honest, I think some of it is just a decision to be happy, and I don't, it's just some of it's nature, but you just have to you just look towards the future, I think.
And how about you and your pain? Tell us the biggest pain about Two Girls, One Shuck.
I think you definitely have to be an eternal optimist. Personally, I've learned that I'm an incredibly patient and outrageously persistent person. And I don't think I recognized that in myself until I started the business. I haven't had one wallop of something that has overhauled us too much, but two quick examples. We started growing so quickly that by year 3, I had purchased enough equipment to do 4 events a day at the same time. Imagine we do a lot of weddings, and there are certain calendar dates where we were turning down 12 brides for a calendar date. So I just plowed forward, staffed up. We have 24 girls on staff right now. And that was spring of 2 years ago, and it was not fun. It just wasn't fun anymore. It was so grueling. We were burning out the girls. We were burning out the equipment. We were just constantly on the go. I really had to check myself and say, where is the joy in what we're doing? I also, the bigger we grew, the farther I have become from the clients, which is hard for me. I'm a people person. I love to meet people. I love to know them, shake their hand, know their name, know their kids. I'm just really, that's an intimate part of why I started the company. So that's been very hard for me to just trust that the brand itself just really resonates with people. And every woman that works for us, I either know personally or they have come to me. I've had people send me their own resume, which I think is so impressive. And they just say, I love what you do. Can I be a part of it? So that's really awesome. But on the daily disappointment level, which you will absolutely have as a business owner or an entrepreneur on any point, yesterday I got a response from my insurance company for an audit that I did last month. And I just got another huge insurance wallop. Completely unexpected. I have paid all my insurance up for the year. I was like, you plan for these things and you save a little bit and then you pay it off and then all of a sudden they just drop another $2,000. Just another $2,000. For what? For air. But you have to have it. You have to have the coverage. So I said I have 2 full-time office staff. I call them my oyster wranglers, and they're amazing. They also do everything. They shuck. But I said to them yesterday when they we got the response on the audit, and I said, I really hope I can say this out loud on that panel tomorrow night. It's not sexy. This is the part of business that it's not dazzling, and it's very challenging to keep believing. And that the first thing when I saw that audit response was, am I going to do this again? Am I going to pour this money into this? And my girls are awesome because they're like, what are we going to do? We're going to dispute it. Because that's an option. They're going to give you an option to dispute it. And I was like, let's look at the hard numbers. These are the numbers that match the audit, and this is the price we should be paying for this and this. I'm like, what is there to dispute? We're a growing company, which means we now pay more in insurance. And they were like, you're right.
Well,
And I said, but we're going to give it a day before we pay it. Because I at least need a day to process.
I think too, facing the struggle and realizing that maybe you're fighting the uphill battle. Mm-hmm. For me, what I do, and I don't think it's an avoidance tactic, but I'm also I'm gonna focus all my energy somewhere where I have no control over it. So we found out about the water heater breaking in the restaurant before we even started, and we gotta spend a bunch of money to replace that. And so I'm like, okay, cool. Well, now I'm gonna look at my wine program mm-hmm. and decide how am I going to structure the menu where I may be changing my volume of sales versus profit margins and tweak it in a theory that's crazy in my brain and spend a bunch of my mental energy on that to be can I make more money this way than what I've been doing in the last 10 years in restaurants or I've seen. Can I do that and make a change so I can stop focusing on something that I just have to write the check and be
Mm-hmm.
done?
Yeah.
Well, we've heard about all the pain and all the agony, and everyone in the room might be starting to think, maybe I've made a wrong decision. Why in the world am I sitting here? But I am certain that every single one of you has some intense joy and love and passion that keeps you going despite everything. So what is it, Vance? Why are you doing and why have you done what you've done?
Well, first I want to apologize. I got a little emotional, okay? But you're not going to be here unless you're passionate about this. You understand? Unless you go through something and it means something. You know, I think about my dad, my grandfather, what they went through, and if I had what it takes to keep it going. And I think that what you find is when you meet those customers, when you service them at the best of your ability, and they come back over and over again, and they come and they tell you stories about your product, about how they had some type of momentous memory that involved your product and participation. I'll do a festival, and I get people like, I can't even be in my booth anymore at Jazz Fest or French Quarter Fest, because if I do, people want to stop and talk to me, and they want to tell me stories, and then whatever, and then my wife is sitting there saying, can you move please? I gotta serve these people. The thing is, that's when you know you've done something. When they come back, I got a guy that comes Jazz Fest every year. They open the gates, I can see him running, first day, from Chicago. He comes running. Now he's got a limp, he's a little older, but he comes every year. He runs, and he comes, he says, I want to be your first customer every year. I love this stuff. And that in itself is all that you need. With all the struggles and all the pain, it's those customers. That's why you're doing this. You're doing it for them. Because without them, you have nothing. When they leave you, their mouth is the best marketing. They will tell somebody. And with social media the way it is, one post can make you or set you back. Customer service is tantamount. So that would be the thing, the joy of serving your customers.
Anybody has some more joy for us?
I would absolutely agree with that 1,000 times over. Being a white girl from Utah, landlocked state, I moved here 17 years ago. So I feel like a local, I hope. Am I good? I bought a house before Katrina.
Oh, you came back?
I rebuilt it and stuck it
Go
out.
ahead.
So to have an oyster-based business is a little outrageous, but what I love the most joy I get is hearing people's stories about oysters and oyster family history. Every single time we go out and shuck for people, they tell us stories. And I really want to do an audio archive. I'm not sure how to do it yet, and I've talked to a few people. The memories and the family traditions, the recipes are just, they really touch me, and I can't imagine someone that's been doing it for centuries. I mean, this isn't news. That's the thing that still brings me the most joy, is to meet people. If you can get to know your customers or your clients by name, do it. You will have repeat customers. We surprisingly have so many repeat customers. If I'm ever really, really frustrated or down, I'll just go on a job. I had a last minute sub in for a wedding last weekend. So last minute that I was home, like, in pajamas. And I ran to the Pharmacy Museum to cover somebody. And just stepping into that footprint, having coordinated with this bride for a year and a half of your life. You talk to these people. You know their names, you know their parents' names, you know their event planners' names. You really get to know them personally. To be able to be there with her and her family, and they just loved everything we did for them. She asked to take a photo with us. That's the moment when the bride is like, can I have a photo with you? Oh, yes, how cool is that? So those are the little joys, the people.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of joy. I think it's taking care of your guests, and I think it's, one of the things that we talked about when we talked about the agony is getting away from the things that you love about the business. That's where the agony comes in, is when you step away from the things that got you in the business. And when those creep up, and they creep up every day, but it's focusing on the things of why you do it. I get I get a lot of joy from my guests, but I get even more joy sometimes from my teams. I just love them, and it's about being around different people, and about trying to achieve a common goal. And I just think that there's something really gratifying about it. And, you know, sometimes it's people enjoying your product. Sometimes it's the relationships you make with your guests. It's the relationships you make with your people and your teams. And it's just in general, just striving to do something that you think is good and saying, hey, world, I think this is good. I hope you do too.
You have any joy, Zach?
I have some joy. So I haven't really been cooking in over a year, like in a kitchen every day, which is weird. I've become very like comfortable in that, and like I want to feel uncomfortable. And I know when I get into that kitchen at Galit, I'm gonna be really amped up to like cook food again, like full time, and like be doing the cooking and less administrative stuff. And what I've been doing is really training staff. And so to kind of reiterate what Neil was saying is like that experience where I get to take my expertise and show someone how to do it well, and put it out consistently and in a very professional manner. That's very rewarding. But like my biggest joy is like I have a 2-year-old, she's almost 2, and I have a wife, and I'm very like happy that I have that, because if I didn't, I would not be very grounded in this like new enterprise that I'm taking on, because now more than like if I didn't have them, I could be like, screw it. If it doesn't work out, I'll just figure out the next thing. But our lives are tied into it. And so the joy is being able to like being like a waste of space at business school here at Tulane. Not bad grades, just like not really exceptional in any way. And taking that and like making my parents super disappointed to go into cooking and making like $10 an hour. And now I'm at this point where I can have a business that's doing millions of dollars in sales a year and like provide for my family. That's an incredible opportunity. So I'm very happy about that. And I'm also happy to be able to do what I really love doing, which is guest facing, teaching and instructing on culture and cuisine and like with the staff every day, and do it for a good purpose. So like all that stuff is like brewing all the time, and those are the things that like drive me to do the job every day, which is really hard. Just going back to that one more time.
Well, I did want to get from everybody the best advice for a newcomer. However, in the interest of time and staying on schedule, I promise Neil is here really as a special favor, because he's got an enormous Tales of the Cocktail obligation. Your education team is here from like internationally.
Yeah, an international education team is in town, so we've been working all day.
Yeah,
trying to get
today's day
education
one.
Locked in. Yeah, day one, and then a half day tomorrow. So
we really can't keep him past the time I promised. So if anybody has any questions for Neil, I wanted to give him the nod. So in 6 minutes, if he'd like, he can hit the road.
I mean, I can be late too.
Okay, well, Neil,
He's the
I
He runs
understand
the
that.
show.
But anyway, I wanted to open it up for questions. And in the meantime, in this mix, if any of you all have your best words of advice for newcomers, I'm sure everybody here would like to hear those words. Any questions for Neil? Yeah.
Hey Neil, my name is Michael Osborne.
Hey, Mike.
Really love Cure. I think it's a great bar. I just wanted to see how did you settle on the location in Ferret?
It's funny because I think that it was not my first choice. It was my business partner Matt's first choice, and he was in construction and real estate, and a lot of the properties on Ferret were flooded, and it took a certain amount of capital just to get them back into commerce. He had been in love with this old firehouse that had been an electrician shop, and he had a vision as a builder for what he thought the building could be, and I just didn't see it. And we went to go take a look at it, and he asked me to get on top of the back of a toilet and then pop up the drop ceiling and climb up, and he gave me he lifted me up, and you could see the ceilings at Cure about 14 feet, and they were dropped to about 9 feet, and I got up and you could see the old firehouse above the drop ceiling, and I just knew. I mean, immediately I just said, well, we got to do it here. And so it's a short story, but there were a lot of reasons why we chose it. But we really felt strongly about the neighborhood. We had used Ferret Street growing up, and we felt like it could be a really special street again.
Another question?
Yes, ma'am.
My name is Robin Hughes, and
Hey, Rob.
my primary care doctor instructed me because I went to him for stress, and he was like, "Don't worry about it. Relax. Go to Cure and have a drink." And so I was like, so I was thinking we would
I
think
need to know who it is.
So our group has been tasked with a restaurant concept. And so we were trying to conceptualize names. So I thought about you when he said you would be here. It's like, so if the primary care doctor suggested I go to Cure, in conceptualizing the name, did you think your restaurant would be the Cure for after Katrina, or did you want to appeal to the medical crowd?
So the forming concept behind Cure, and the initial name was going to be called Apothecary, and you can't call something in Louisiana and a lot of other states an apothecary if it's not a pharmacy. So we realized pretty quickly that wasn't going to work. We thought Cure was a pretty simple idea, cocktails coming out of medicine, and the idea of patent medicine and what it led to. Now, there's a lot of history that's come out since then that shows that was just one feeder for the modern cocktail, but it was something that we used as an organizing principle.
Okay, well, do you all, yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
My name's Ryan Green. How do you how big of a threat is it for like another bar to come around and just like take your business, and like that could happen at any time? Like, does that scare you or?
No, I mean, look, it's hard not to feel. I think that any business owner looks at market share, and to say that doesn't exist is, I'd be lying if I said that doesn't exist. But ultimately, I think that you can't control the things that happen around you, and it's if you think about it like sports, operating a business, operating a bar, operating a restaurant is like golf. You have to be concerned about what you can do and not about what other people do. And you just have to stay focused on your product and what you do. And obviously what's happening around you, but you can't be too reactionary either. I mean, one of the great things about New Orleans is that in New Orleans, I'd like to believe that we try and build things to last. It's not, you don't build a restaurant for 5 years. Hopefully, you build it for as many years as you're alive. I mean, we have one of the stated goals of Cure was that I hope that Cure will be around after I'm dead. And if I do my job, I hope that can be the case.
Do you have any words for newcomers?
Yeah, don't lose hope. I mean, we're giving you a lot of reality, and it's hard, and there are ups and downs, but you just if you really want to do something, you have to be dedicated to it. It took me 5 years to open Cure, from the aha moment I want to do this to opening the doors, and you just have to stay focused on what you want to do, and it's a goal, and you just work, and you try and get over the setbacks, and you try and keep a good attitude, and you don't get too high and you don't get too low.
Okay, so for the record, with 1 minute to go, Neil is officially released from his obligation, but you may stay for as long as you'd like.
Thank you.
And timely is very important to me.
Thank you.
How about questions for the rest of the panel? No one has any questions?
I got one more for you.
Oh, okay.
How's that airport bar looking?
Oh, I don't know. We'll see. Hopefully good. Hopefully good. We're still working with those guys. It is a very much hurry up and wait, if you can believe.
You got extra time.
Yeah.
With the name.
Okay, other questions?
When you guys finally decided, sorry, my name's Adrian Bodie. When you guys finally decided to jump in, were there people, friends, family who were kind of dissuading you from doing so, or? Yeah. You guys just pursued regardless?
I have very Jewish grandparents, and they're like born and raised in Brooklyn, live in New Jersey, and they're always like, the restaurant business is so hard, like you work all the time. And I'm like, well, my dad's a rabbi, so my dad's never home on weekends, and he works all the time, and like he seems like he has value in his life. And I was just like, yeah, it doesn't matter to me. Like, people dissuade you all the time. If you let that become the narrative in your head, then you'll give up. But I mean, you also don't need to like fake convince yourself that it's what you want to do. If you really don't like something, don't do it. Like, I think we all really like what we're doing.
Trust your gut. Trust your gut.
For sure.
Learn to listen to yourself. You know whether you should do it or not. Just listen.
I think I've been incredibly fortunate that I expected a lot of pushback. I was trying to be very mindful about all kinds of roles that women in the oyster industry, women taking jobs from men in the oyster industry. I really thought through this a lot. And I was really lucky to help open the oyster bar in St. Roch Market when that concept was first opening. And by doing so, I got to work with so many talented male shuckers, men that have shucked for decades. And not only from that oyster bar, I then ended up working at many oyster bars, because I think I knew in my heart of hearts, my goal's never been to have a retail oyster bar. There are so many oyster bars in New Orleans already. But the mentorship I ended up getting from all of these people was so valuable to me, because no one, this is gonna sound like a misnomer, no one ever said you can't do this to me. They all said, girl, you can do this. This is great. So that just lifted me more and more as the years went on, and the support from the industry themselves. Also growers, farmers, a lot of the guys out on the water, it's 98% dudes. And even all of my distributors, all my purveyors, people I buy from, predominantly male. And it's very cool. This past year, I've actually had distributors call me and say, I want to sell my product to Two Girls One Shuck. And so I've been very lucky. I haven't had a whole lot of pushback.
You know, to say that I haven't, after Katrina, I wanted to quit. It was too much. I didn't think I could do it. And, right before Katrina, sometime before, my dad died in '98, massive heart attack. We got our biggest contract ever. And he died that night when we were going to do our own self-distribution. I opened up the next day, and I told the crew, we got one big cry, and we kept going. Then after Katrina, I said, we're going to get back and do this. And my office manager, who was my cousin, we were working on doing it, but she just couldn't break her depression, and she shot herself and her 2 kids. So it set me back even further, because I didn't have my right hand. And then I'm sitting there, and I'm in the country in New Iberia after the storm, and I'm like, what am I going to do, what am I going to do? And I'll never forget, I got a call from Jazz Fest. Hey, we're going to do the Jazz Fest. Are you in? I said, I don't have a place to make sausage. Well, see if you can find somewhere. So went out and worked with actually a competitor. And I said, look, this is what I need to do. Can you work? He said, look, I'm trying to rebuild too. Let's see if we can make this work. I told him what I needed to make, filled up one of his coolers. And he told me, he says, man, I came that Monday after the first weekend of the fest. I said, there's no way he sold all that crap. And he ain't have a box of the cooler. Mm-hmm. And I said, guess what? We got to do it all again. Make it all this week for the next weekend. And luckily, it brought about, you have to think out the box. So now I'm in a private label agreement with a USDA facility that allows me to have product on the street to my commercial customers. Haven't gone to retail yet because I learned some lessons from there. You got to look at your markets and you got to figure out what you're going to do. But to say that I didn't want to give up, I can't tell that lie. But something just had me to say, yeah, you got to just keep going. And so I'm here.
Any other burning questions from my crew? Well, ladies and gentlemen.
There's one.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Hi, my name is Alejandra. Thank you so much for being here. I was wondering about what you were talking about earlier about mindfulness, and also we heard earlier that you, Neil, were sort of a change maker in the Ferret community early on. So I'm wondering about that, about community engagement and how you're mindful when you're running your business in a new community. And for example, we know that you're opening your restaurant and a new place for you because you've been working in New Orleans for so long. So when you walk into something new, whether it be a new line of business or a new place, when you engage with the community and try to be mindful about your work, how do you go about that? What's the train of thought like?
I'm just going to say one thing real quick, and then I'll be quiet and leave. So I was really fortunate in New York to work for Danny Meyer, and he had a hierarchy that said, as you look at your list, it was team first, then it was your vendors, and then it was it was team, vendors, community, and then guest. And so we've always tried
There's
to.
one more.
Yeah, what's the other one?
Investors.
Investors.
They're last,
Yeah, they are last.
according to the Bible.
So, and it's always stuck with me that you start with your team, because without your team, you just can't exist. And then that without your vendors and great relationships with your suppliers, that you can't exist either. But that you really can't exist without your community as well. And so you have to be engaged in giving back to our community. And I think that if you're going to be a part of a community, you sure as hell want to make it better. And I think it. And for us, it's been an ethos in our business, and I think if you were to look around at everybody on this panel, they would all agree.
I'm glad you asked this specifically because I would feel terrible if I didn't mention how dynamite my lovely lady shucker staff is. They are the entire business, and they do nothing but go out to the community and spread the oyster gospel, which is really, we're lucky that we're not in one place. Like, we're everywhere.
That's true.
So we really get to meet new people every single time we go out. The mindfulness piece for me specifically is I knew, just because I have such an endearing love for the physicality of what an oyster is, that I have never been able to throw away an oyster shell. So the first 2 years of the business, I created my own midden. A midden is a stack of shells. And so in my backyard, I had this ridiculous midden of shells. And I was very lucky that the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana started the very first oyster shell recycling program in the city of New Orleans because of the BP oil spill. And shell, gotta love some shell, for Jazz Fest and this, they gave out a $1 million grant to any restaurant that wanted free oyster shell recycling that first year. So I hounded them, and I was like, me, I want oyster shell recycling. I was like trying to give them away on Craigslist. I would do anything to save the shells. And luckily I got through to them, started in with the program from the beginning. And so my piece of mindfulness is oysters love to grow on oyster shell. You should never throw a shell away. Like, baby oyster spat wants to land on their shells. So we're very lucky to have been participating with this program and continue to do so. So if you ever see us at parties schlepping out black buckets of shells, we truly put them back in the water to grow more oysters. And it's all community-based. It's not just for us, it's for thinking about all of the people on the coastline who are losing so much in all kinds of environmental issues. It's like, this is the very least we can do. It feels like a very tiny part that I hope matters for the long haul.
Okay, last question. We're 10 minutes over.
Becky, you were saying you have like a ton of demand and like you're shutting down, like you have to turn down weddings. Like, have you raised your prices to, like, yeah?
Significantly. That's been very hard, again, for me as the non-business major. If I could do this for free, I would. That's my piece of advice. There it is. If you would do this, if you would pursue this, if you would have the passion to do this and not get paid, that's when you know you've got it.
There are times when you're not.
I actually don't, I barely pay myself.
Yeah.
And that, because my staff comes first.
Yep.
It's more important for me to pay the people that are really running my company. I call myself the show pony now, even doing panels like this. People are like, so what are you doing now in the company? You're the founder, you're the CEO. No, I don't call myself any of that. I call myself an oyster ambassador because I just want to go out and talk about oysters just like this every single day. But I'm just a little show pony. I'm just like, this is what you do. But if you will do it for free, then you're on the right track. It can never be about money. If you make money, awesome, especially if you have a family and kids. So, I mean, I don't have kids, so I'm very lucky. My dog is very forgiving. If we have to make payroll 1 week, it's okay.
That's great advice, though. It really is, because there are going to
Yeah.
be times where it's just passion. It's getting you through. It's
Yeah.
not money.
Yeah. So anyway, what else did you ask? I'm sorry. Okay.
Okay, well, in that case, I would like to thank my esteemed panelists. I'm so grateful that they all came this evening, and thanks to you all, and thanks to the people from Tulane, from the A.B. Freeman School of Business for having us. And I think they're going to serve snacks after school, so I heard a rumor there were snacks, so thank you all.
Thank you.